Turin, Italy, January 1889. A man stands on a street corner, watching a horse being beaten by its driver. The horse is old, exhausted, collapsing under the weight of its load. The driver strikes it again and again, cursing, trying to force it to move. The man watching cannot bear it. He rushes forward, throws his arms around the horse's neck and begins weeping. He whispers to the animal, apologizing on behalf of humanity. Then he collapses. The man is Friedrich Nietzsche. He is 44 years old, and his mind has just broken. He will spend the next 11 years in complete mental darkness, cared for by his mother and sister, unable to speak coherently, barely recognizing anyone. The greatest philosophical mind of the 19th century has been extinguished. But before the collapse, in the final productive year of his life, Nietzsche wrote like a man possessed. He produced 5 books in 1888, writing with feverish intensity, as if he knew time was running out. The most vicious, most uncompromising of these books was The Antichrist, a sustained attack on Christianity so brutal, so contemptuous, that even his admirers found it difficult to read. The book opens with a declaration. Let us look each other in the face. We are Hyperboreans. Not Europeans, not Germans, but Hyperboreans. Mythical people who lived beyond the north wind, beyond civilization's comfortable lies. People who can endure the truth. And the truth Nietzsche claims to reveal is this. Christianity is not merely false. It is poison. It is a conspiracy against life itself. It has infected Western civilization with values that deny everything strong, healthy, and noble. It has made weakness into virtue, suffering into sanctity, and resentment into righteousness. It must be destroyed completely or it will destroy us. This is not critique, this is war. Nietzsche is not arguing with Christianity. He is trying to annihilate it, to expose it so thoroughly that no honest person could ever believe again. The question is whether he succeeded. Whether his arguments actually destroy Christianity or merely reveal his own wounds. Whether the Antichrist is philosophy or symptom, truth or the ravings of a mind already beginning to fracture. Reading the book is disturbing. The contempt is so intense it becomes almost physical. Nietzsche doesn't just disagree with Christian teaching. He hates it with a passion that feels pathological. Every page drips with venom. Every argument is designed not to persuade but to wound. This was his final shot, fired from a mind teetering on the edge of collapse. The book that was supposed to revalue all values, to liberate humanity from 2,000 years of poisonous teaching. Instead, it became the testament of a man who destroyed himself, trying to destroy God. The Pastor's Son. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in Rocken, a small village in Prussia. His father was a Lutheran pastor, descended from a line of pastors. His mother came from a family of pastors. He was raised in a household saturated with Protestant piety, scripture reading, hymn singing, the constant awareness of God's judgment. His father died when Nietzsche was 4 years old. The man suffered from what was described as softening of the brain, probably a tumor, and descended into madness before dying. Young Friedrich watched this deterioration, saw his strong father reduced to babbling incomprehension, witnessed the cruelty of nature and the absence of divine intervention. After his father's death, Nietzsche was raised by women, his mother, sister, grandmother, and 2 aunts. The household was oppressively pious, rigidly moral, suffocating in its respectability. The boy was expected to become a pastor like his father and grandfather. His path seemed predetermined. He was brilliant from early age. He excelled at languages, mastering Greek and Latin, devouring classical literature. He loved music, particularly Wagner's operas with their Germanic mythology and emotional intensity. He seemed destined for academic greatness. But something was wrong. Even as a teenager, Nietzsche felt constricted by Christian morality, by the constant emphasis on humility, obedience, denial of earthly pleasures. He wrote in his diary about feeling divided, about sensing that the values he was taught contradicted something deeper in his nature. At university, studying theology and philology, the crisis intensified. He read David Strauss's Life of Jesus, which treated the Gospels as mythology rather than history. He encountered Schopenhauer's philosophy, which presented the world as meaningless suffering that could only be escaped through denial of the will to live. These readings shattered his faith, not gradually, but suddenly. One day he believed. The next day, or so it seemed, he didn't. The entire Christian worldview collapsed like a structure that had been secretly hollow. But losing faith didn't bring relief. It brought terror. If God doesn't exist, then what grounds morality? What makes anything meaningful? Why not suicide? Schopenhauer argued that suicide was rational, that life was suffering, and non-existence was preferable. Nietzsche felt the pull of this logic, but resisted it. He abandoned theology for philology, the study of ancient languages and texts. He would not be a pastor. He would be a scholar, investigating the classical world, trying to find in ancient Greece an alternative to Christian values. The discovery of Dionysus. At age 24, Nietzsche was appointed professor of classical philology at the University of Basel. This was extraordinarily young for such a position. His talent was undeniable. His future seemed assured. But Nietzsche had no interest in conventional scholarship. He wasn't content to edit texts and write careful papers about Greek grammar. He wanted to understand what the Greeks knew that modernity had forgotten. What made their culture so vital, so creative, so alive? His answer came in his first book, The Birth of Tragedy, published in 1872. The Greeks, Nietzsche argued, understood something that Christianity denies: that life is suffering, chaos, violence, and death, and that the proper response is not denial, but affirmation. Not escape, but embrace. Greek culture balanced two opposing forces which Nietzsche named after Greek gods. The Apollonian was order, rationality, beauty, the imposition of form on chaos. The Dionysian was intoxication, ecstasy, the dissolution of boundaries, the acceptance of life's cruelty and tragedy. Greek tragedy achieved greatness by combining both. It showed life's horror, the inevitability of suffering and death, but transformed that horror into beauty through artistic form. The audience experienced catharsis, not by denying suffering, but by witnessing it fully and recognizing it as essential to existence. Christianity, Nietzsche argued, destroyed this balance. It kept the Apollonian emphasis on order but eliminated the Dionysian acceptance of life's darkness. It promised escape from suffering through faith, redemption through denying earthly existence, eternal life as compensation for temporal pain. This was a lie, Nietzsche believed. There is no escape from suffering. Life is suffering. Promising otherwise is not compassion but cruelty, because it teaches people to hate existence, to see the only life we actually have as merely preparation for an imaginary afterlife. The book was brilliant and completely destroyed Nietzsche's academic career. Scholars rejected it as unscholarly speculation. His colleagues distanced themselves. Students stopped enrolling in his courses. He had violated the unwritten rules of academic discourse, had written philosophy instead of philology, passion instead of careful analysis. Nietzsche didn't care. He had found his enemy. Christianity was not just false, it was life-denying, a conspiracy against existence itself, and he would spend the rest of his career fighting it. The death of God. In 1882, Nietzsche published The Gay Science, which contains the famous parable of the madman who runs into a marketplace shouting, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him." The parable is often misunderstood. Nietzsche is not celebrating. The madman is terrified. He's announcing a catastrophe, not a liberation. God's death means the collapse of everything built on the assumption of divine order, morality, meaning, purpose, value. Everything becomes uncertain. The madman asks questions no one wants to answer. How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Where is it moving now? Where are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? This is not atheist triumphalism. This is existential vertigo. Without God, there's no fixed point. no absolute reference, no foundation for anything. We're floating in infinite space without direction or purpose. This realization should be shattering. But Nietzsche noticed something strange. Most people didn't seem to care. They stopped believing in God but continued living as if Christian morality still applied. They kept the commandments while abandoning the commander. They wanted the comfort of absolute values without the burden of belief. This was dishonest. If God is dead, then Christian morality dies with him. You cannot keep the ethics while discarding the metaphysics. Values don't float free. They're grounded in worldviews. Change the worldview, and you must change the values. But people resisted this logic. They wanted to be modern, scientific, rational, freed from superstition. But they also wanted to keep believing in human rights, equality, compassion, altruism, all values that make sense in a Christian framework but become problematic without it. Nietzsche saw this as weakness, as people wanting comfort from both sides. They wanted the intellectual satisfaction of atheism and the moral comfort of Christianity. They wanted to kill God without accepting the consequences. His task, as he understood it, was to force those consequences into consciousness. To show that God's death changes everything, that we must choose, either find new foundations for values or admit that values are human creations with no absolute basis. This project required destroying Christianity completely, showing its psychological origins, revealing how it manipulated human instincts, exposing its will to power disguised as humility. This became his obsession. The long preparation. Through the 1880s, Nietzsche wrote book after book, each attacking Christianity from different angles. Thus, Spoke Zarathustra presented an alternative prophet teaching earth affirmation instead of otherworldly hope. Beyond Good and Evil deconstructed moral concepts, showing them as expressions of power rather than eternal truths. On the Genealogy of Morals traced Christian values to their psychological origins in resentment and weakness. But these were preparations. Nietzsche was gathering weapons, refining arguments, working toward a final statement that would demolish Christianity so completely that it could never recover. His personal life was dissolving. He had resigned his professorship due to chronic illness. He suffered from terrible headaches, digestive problems, near blindness at times. He wandered through Europe, living in cheap boarding houses, writing constantly, publishing at his own expense because established publishers rejected his work. He had almost no readers. His books sold poorly. The few people who read them often misunderstood them, seeing only the provocative surface without grasping the deeper argument. He was alone, unknown, convinced of his own genius but unable to make anyone else see it. He had one friend who understood him, Lou Salome, a brilliant Russian woman who rejected his marriage proposal and left him devastated. She saw his greatness but also saw something unstable in him, something heading toward breakdown. She was right. By 1888, Nietzsche was writing in a manic state, producing book after book at impossible speed. He felt himself approaching something, some final clarity that would let him say everything he needed to say before time ran out. He planned a massive work called The Revaluation of All Values, which would systematically destroy Christian morality and replace it with new values based on life affirmation rather than life denial. The Antichrist was supposed to be just the first part of this larger project. But as he wrote, the scope narrowed. The book became not the first part of a larger work, but a self-contained assault, everything compressed into one devastating attack. He wrote with fury, with contempt that bordered on hysteria, with absolute certainty that he was right, and Christianity was poison. The result was a book unlike anything in philosophy. Not argument, but annihilation. Not critique, but warfare. The gloves were off. Nietzsche was going to say everything, hold nothing back, burn every bridge. The revaluation of values. The Antichrist opens by identifying its audience, the few who can handle truth, not the masses who need comforting lies, not the scholars who hide behind academic neutrality, only those strong enough to face reality without illusion. Nietzsche announces his project immediately. A revaluation of all values, not improvement or reform, but complete reversal. Everything Christianity calls good, he will call bad. Everything it condemns, he will praise. The entire moral framework must be inverted. Why? Because Christianity gets everything backward. It calls weakness strength, calls suffering blessed, calls the meek worthy of inheriting the earth. It takes natural human instincts, healthy drives toward power and excellence, and declares them sinful. It makes sickness into virtue. Nietzsche's alternative is stark. What is good? Everything that heightens the feeling of power in man, the will to power, power itself. What is bad? Everything that is born of weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that resistance is overcome. This is not subtle. Power is good. Weakness is bad. Simple as that. Not power over others necessarily, but power over oneself. The ability to overcome obstacles, to create, to grow, to become stronger. Christianity inverts this. It makes weakness sacred. The poor, the suffering, the meek, these are Christianity's heroes. Why? Because Christianity emerged from the powerless, from people who couldn't compete in the real world, and so created an imaginary world where their weakness became virtue. This is Nietzsche's genealogical method. Don't ask whether values are true. Ask where they came from. Trace them to their psychological origins. Christian values emerged from resentment, from the powerless hating the powerful and creating a morality that condemns strength and elevates suffering. This is what Nietzsche calls slave morality. Slaves cannot overthrow their masters through force, so they do it through morality. They declare that the masters are evil, that power and pride and excellence are sins. They make their own weakness into virtue, and their master's strength into vice. And it worked. Christianity conquered Rome not through military might, but through moral inversion. It convinced people that the values they naturally admired, courage, strength, pride, excellence, were actually evil. It made them ashamed of their health and proud of their sickness. The invention of sin. The key to Christianity's power, Nietzsche argues, is the concept of sin. Not wrongdoing or crime, but sin, the idea that you are fundamentally broken, inherently guilty, deserving of eternal punishment for simply existing. This is psychological terrorism. Christianity tells you that your natural drives, sexual desire, ambition, pride, self-interest are evil. You cannot help having these drives. They're built into human nature. But having them makes you guilty, damned, deserving of hell. Then Christianity offers the solution. Salvation through faith in Christ. You cannot save yourself. Your efforts are worthless. Only submission to God, only faith in the redemption Christ purchased through his suffering, can save you from the damnation you deserve. This creates total dependence. You are broken. You cannot fix yourself. Only the church, only faith, only submission can save you. And you must maintain this faith constantly, because backsliding means damnation. You can never relax, never feel secure, never trust yourself. Nietzsche sees this as brilliant and evil. It's a perfect system of control. Make people hate themselves, then offer salvation that requires permanent dependence on your institution. Make health into sickness so you can sell the cure. The concept of free will is essential to this system. Christianity needs you to be freely choosing sin so that your guilt is genuine and your damnation is just. If you're just following your nature, you're not guilty. But if you're freely choosing evil, then punishment is deserved. But free will, Nietzsche argues, is an invent ion. There's no evidence for it. Our actions arise from our character, our circumstances, our drives. We don't choose our nature, we are our nature. The idea that we could have done otherwise is an illusion. Christianity invented free will to create guilt. It needed people to be responsible for their nature so it could condemn that nature and then offer salvation from the condemnation. It's circular, self-justifying, and psychologically devastating. The historical Jesus. Nietzsche makes a surprising move. He separates Jesus from Christianity. Jesus, he argues, was not a Christian. He was something else entirely, something the church distorted and weaponized. The real Jesus, Nietzsche suggests, was a kind of holy fool, someone who lived in a state of childlike innocence, without resentment or judgment, teaching love and forgiveness without the baggage of theology. He didn't preach about sin and damnation. He didn't promise rewards in heaven. He simply lived in the present, connected to God as a child connects to a parent. This Jesus is psychologically interesting but ultimately useless. He's too innocent for the real world. He cannot survive contact with power, with violence, with reality's cruelty, which is why he was crucified. The world destroys such innocence. But then something happened that changed everything. The disciples, especially Paul, couldn't accept that their teacher had simply died. Death was defeat, proof that Jesus was wrong, that innocence cannot survive. So they invented a story. Jesus didn't lose. He won. Death was part of the plan. He died to save humanity from sin. This invention transformed everything. Jesus' teaching of love became a religion of guilt and redemption. His acceptance of life became a promise of afterlife. His innocence became a weapon. Paul is the real villain in Nietzsche's narrative. Paul took Jesus' simple teaching and built a theological system around it. He invented the concept of original sin, the idea that Adam's disobedience infected all humanity with guilt. He turned Jesus' death into cosmic sacrifice that paid humanity's debt to God. This was Paul's genius and his crime. He created a religion that could spread because it promised what people wanted: escape from death, punishment for enemies, reward for suffering, meaning imposed from outside. He took Jesus' teaching of love and turned it into an instrument of control. Christianity is not Jesus' teaching. It's Paul's invention, built on top of Jesus' corpse, using his name to legitimize a system he would have rejected. This is Nietzsche's most cutting argument. Christians don't follow Christ. They follow Paul's distortion of Christ. The psychology of faith. Nietzsche doesn't just attack Christian theology. He psychoanalyzes Christian believers, explaining what kind of person needs faith and why. Faith, he argues, is weakness disguised as strength. The faithful claim to have certainty, to know absolute truth, but their certainty comes from refusing to question, from shutting down doubt, from choosing comfort over honesty. Real strength would be living with uncertainty, accepting that we don't know, creating meaning without divine guarantees. The believer needs God as father figure, needs to remain child, needs someone to tell them what's right and wrong. This is not maturity but arrested development. Adults create their own values. Children need parents to provide values. Christianity keeps believers in perpetual childhood. Prayer, Nietzsche suggests, is talking to yourself while pretending someone else is listening. It's a way to avoid taking responsibility. If God is listening, then your problems aren't really yours. You can ask for help instead of helping yourself. You can blame God when things go wrong instead of accepting life's randomness. The belief in miracles reveals the same psychology. People want reality to violate its own laws for their benefit. They want special treatment, want to be exempted from nature's indifference. This is narcissism, the belief that the universe cares about you specifically. Heaven is the ultimate wish fulfillment fantasy. You don't really die. You get eternal life. And not just any life, but perfect life, without suffering or limitation. And your enemies, those who didn't believe, they get eternal torture. Heaven satisfies both hope and resentment, both the desire for reward and the desire for revenge. Nietzsche's psychological analysis is cutting, because it's often accurate. Many believers do use faith as comfort, as escape from responsibility, as fantasy that makes reality bearable. The question is whether this makes faith false, or whether comfort and meaning-making are legitimate human needs that atheism cannot satisfy. Christianity is vampirism. Nietzsche's most disturbing metaphor is Christianity as vampire. It doesn't kill life directly. It drains it slowly, feeding on vitality until only a husk remains. Christianity, he argues, has declared war on everything healthy, on the body, which it calls flesh, and condemns as sinful, on pride, which it calls the worst sin, on power, which it declares evil, on sexuality, which it treats as shameful, on this world, which it dismisses as merely temporary preparation for the next. The result is systematic devaluation of the only life we actually have. Christians spend their entire existence preparing for an afterlife that probably doesn't exist. They deny themselves pleasure, suppress natural drives, feel guilty for being human. They waste the one chance at existence they'll ever get. And Christianity celebrates suffering. The cross is its central symbol, a torture device, representing a man being slowly killed. This is what Christianity venerates: pain, sacrifice, death. Not life's beauty, but its agony. Saints are people who tortured themselves, who lived in caves or on pillars, who starved and beat and mutilated themselves. These are Christianity's heroes, not people who created beauty or discovered truth or built civilization, but people who suffered most dramatically. This creates a culture of sickness. Healthy instincts are suppressed. Natural desires are condemned. People learn to hate their own bodies, to see themselves as fundamentally corrupt. They become psychologically damaged, split against themselves, unable to act decisively because every action might be sinful. Nietzsche compares Christianity to a parasite that has infected Western civilization. It doesn't kill the host immediately. It weakens it gradually, draining vitality, making it sick, until the culture loses its creative power and becomes obsessed with guilt, sin, and otherworldly redemption. The solution is radical, complete removal of the parasite. Not reform or reinterpretation, but total elimination. Christianity cannot be fixed because the problem is not accidental, but essential. The life denial is not a distortion of Christianity, it is Christianity. The final pages. The last sections of the Antichrist descend into something beyond argument. Nietzsche is raving, cursing, prophesying. The philosophical analysis gives way to raw hatred. He calls Christianity the one great curse, the one great innermost corruption, the one great instinct of revenge, for which no means is poisonous, stealthy, subterranean, small enough. This is not criticism. This is declaration of war. He proposes a new calendar that begins not with Christ's birth, but with what he calls the day of salvation, the day Christianity died. This day has not yet arrived, but Nietzsche believes he is bringing it about through his writing. He declares, "I call Christianity the one great curse, the one great intrinsic depravity, the one great instinct for revenge for which no expedient is sufficiently poisonous, secret, subterranean, petty. I call it the one immortal blemish of mankind." The contempt is total. There is no hedging, no academic distance, no pretense of neutrality. Nietzsche wants Christianity destroyed, wants its memory erased, wants future generations to look back on it as we look back on human sacrifice or slavery, as an atrocity that humanity outgrew. He ends the book with what he calls the law against Christianity, a mock legal decree condemning Christianity as a crime against humanity. Priests should be imprisoned, churches should be destroyed, Christian teaching should be banned. Everyone who professes faith should be exiled to some unhealthy swamp. This is not serious policy proposal. It's rhetorical violence, Nietzsche venting his fury through fantasy of total victory. But the fury is real. The hatred is genuine. Something has broken in him. The silence after. Nietzsche finished The Antichrist in September 1888. He wrote to friends claiming it was the most important book ever written, that it would split human history in two, that nothing would be the same after it. He was working on more books, planning the larger revaluation of all values project. His productivity was manic. He barely slept. He wrote letters full of grandiose claims about his own importance. He signed them the Antichrist, or Dionysus. Then came January 1889, and the horse and the collapse. The man who had tried to destroy Christianity with words was destroyed by his own brain. The final 11 years were silence, his mother and sister caring for him like a large child who occasionally recognized them, but mostly lived in some private darkness. His sister Elizabeth took control of his literary estate. She was a German nationalist, an anti-Semite, everything Nietzsche had despised. She edited his unpublished notes, creating a book called The Will to Power that distorted his ideas to serve her politics. She sold his image to the Nazis, who adopted him as their philosopher, despite his explicit contempt for nationalism and anti-Semitism. The Antichrist was published in 1895, but few people read it. The few who did were shocked by its violence, its hatred, its apparent madness. It seemed like the work of someone already mentally ill. Not serious philosophy, but symptom of breakdown. Only gradually did the book find its audience. Atheists embraced it as the definitive destruction of Christianity. Existentialists saw in it the recognition that we must create meaning in a meaningless universe. Postmodernists appreciated its genealogical method, its tracing of ideas to their origins in power and psychology rather than truth. But did it actually destroy Christianity? 2,000 years later, Christianity remains the world's largest religion. Billions believe. Churches still stand. The values Nietzsche attacked, compassion, equality, care for the weak, remain central to Western ethics, even among non-believers. If anything, Nietzsche's attack might have strengthened Christianity by forcing it to become more sophisticated, to develop responses to his arguments, to think more carefully about its own foundations. The unanswered questions. The Antichrist raises questions it cannot answer. Nietzsche is brilliant at destruction, at showing what's wrong with Christian values. But what should replace them? His positive vision, the will to power, the Übermensch, life affirmation remains vague. He tells us to say yes to existence, to embrace life's cruelty along with its beauty. But what does that mean practically? How do we build a society on these principles? Nietzsche attacks Christian compassion as weakness, as resentment disguised as virtue. But is all compassion merely resentment? Is caring for the sick and weak always slave morality? Or is there strength in compassion, power in choosing to help others not from weakness but from abundance? He celebrates power but never defines it carefully. Power to do what? Power over others or power over oneself? The distinction matters enormously. Nietzsche seems to mean primarily self-overcoming, becoming stronger, more creative, more excellent. But his language is often ambiguous enough that fascists could read him as celebrating domination. His psychological analysis of Christianity is often accurate. Yes, many believers use faith as comfort. Yes, guilt is a tool of control. Yes, heaven is wish fulfillment. But does exposing the psychological origins of beliefs prove they're false? Couldn't Christian values be both psychologically useful and true? Nietzsche assumes that anything arising from weakness or resentment must be bad. But this doesn't follow. Even if Christian morality originated in the resentment of the powerless, that doesn't make equality or compassion wrong. Origins don't determine validity. Most fundamentally, Nietzsche never adequately answers why we should prefer his values to Christian ones. He asserts that power and strength are good, but why? In a universe without God, without transcendent meaning, why is power better than compassion? Why is strength superior to kindness? He would say these questions already assume Christian framing, that asking why seeks justification that only makes sense in a Christian worldview. His values don't need justification. They're based on life affirmation, on saying yes to existence as it is. But this seems circular. We should affirm life because life affirmation is good. But good according to what standard? Nietzsche's values, which we accept because we affirm life. The circle never breaks. The prophet's curse. The Antichrist is not a successful philosophical argument. It's too emotional, too contemptuous, too caught up in rage to be convincing. Nietzsche doesn't prove Christianity is false. He doesn't demonstrate that his values are superior. He asserts, attacks, and prophesies. But the book succeeds as something else, as testimony from someone who saw clearly, who refused comfortable lies, who followed his logic into darkness that most people carefully avoid. Nietzsche understood that if God is dead, everything changes. Not just theology, but morality, meaning, purpose, identity, everything. And he saw that most people, even atheists, refused to accept this. They wanted God dead, but values alive. They wanted freedom from religious authority, but kept Christian ethics. This dishonesty enraged him. Either accept God and his commandments, or reject God and create new values. Don't pretend you can have both. Don't kill God on Sunday and worship his ethics on Monday. His attack on Christianity revealed something important. How much of what we consider self-evident morality is actually Christian inheritance? The ideas that all humans have equal worth, that the weak deserve protection, that suffering should be minimized, these are not obvious truths. They're Christian values that became so embedded in Western culture that even atheists assume them without recognizing their origin. Nietzsche forced us to see this. He asked uncomfortable questions. Why is equality good? Why should we care about strangers' suffering? Why is power bad and weakness good? These questions don't have obvious answers once you remove the theological framework that made them seem natural. But his alternative remains incomplete. The Übermensch is an aspiration, not a program. Life affirmation sounds inspiring until you ask what it means in practice. His critique is sharper than his creation. Perhaps that's fitting. Destruction is easier than construction. Tearing down 2,000 years of values is simpler than building something new. Nietzsche was a prophet of transition, announcing the death of old gods without fully birthing new ones. The book that was supposed to destroy Christianity instead became a mirror. Christians reading it see their faith's weaknesses exposed mercilessly. Atheists see that killing God creates more problems than it solves. Both are left uncomfortable, uncertain, forced to think more carefully about what they believe and why. Nietzsche died without seeing his prophecy fulfilled. Christianity survived him. But it survived changed, forced to become more sophisticated, to answer questions it had previously ignored, to justify values it had assumed were self-evident. The war he declared continues, not between Christianity and its enemies, but within each person who tries to think honestly about morality, meaning, and how to live. Nietzsche made that thinking harder, more honest, more uncomfortable. That might be his real victory. Not destroying Christianity, but making certainty impossible, forcing us to recognize that our values are choices, not discoveries, that we create meaning in a universe that offers none. The horse he wept for is long dead. The man who wept is dead. The God he killed was perhaps already dead. But the questions remain, fierce and unanswered, waiting for anyone brave enough or foolish enough to face them. Are you Hyperborean enough? Can you endure the truth? Or do you, like almost everyone, prefer the comfortable lie? Nietzsche would despise either answer, which is exactly his point.